In 1940, as Nazi Germany crushed nearly every army standing in its path, Adolf Hitler believed Europe belonged to him. France was collapsing. British troops were retreating. Entire nations surrendered in weeks. But then, something happened that enraged Hitler so deeply that Nazi propaganda called it a humiliation to the white race. Because among the soldiers fighting against the Nazis were thousands of African troops. Before we dive into the main story, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell notification button for more interesting video like this. Men from Senegal, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Mali, and other African colonies under French control. They fought in frozen forests, deserts, mountains, and ruined European cities. Some charged machine guns with bayonets. Some crossed minefields under artillery fire. Others became resistance fighters after France fell. And according to captured German reports, many Nazi soldiers were terrified of these African regiments because of their fearlessness in battle. But after the war, their story was buried. Many were denied recognition. Some were massacred by the very allies they fought for. And history almost erased them completely. Tonight, we uncover the hidden story of the African soldiers Hitler feared most, and how African troops helped destroy Nazi Germany. To understand this story, you first need to understand one thing. By the beginning of World War II, France controlled one of the largest colonial empires on Earth. Across Africa, millions of Africans lived under French rule. From West Africa to North Africa, France relied heavily on colonial manpower. Long before World War II began, France had already started recruiting African soldiers known as the Tirailleurs Senegalese. Despite the name, these soldiers did not come only from Senegal. They came from many territories across French West Africa, including modern-day Senegal, Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Niger, Ivory Coast. The force was officially created in 1857 under the orders of French General Louis Faidherbe. Originally, France used African troops to expand colonial rule. But by World War I, they became critical to defending Europe itself. Over 200,000 African soldiers fought for France during the First World War. Many died in horrific trench warfare. Yet despite their sacrifices, racism remained deeply rooted within the French military system. African troops were often paid less, given worse living conditions, and viewed as expendable. But when World War II erupted in September 1939 after invasion of Poland, France once again turned to Africa. Because France desperately needed soldiers. And Africa answered. Over 400,000 African troops would eventually serve in various French military forces during the war. Some volunteered. Others were forcibly recruited. Many had never even seen Europe before. Yet soon, they would find themselves fighting one of the deadliest military machines in human history. Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler's ideology was built on racial supremacy. The Nazis believed so-called Aryans were superior to all other races. So when African soldiers began appearing on European battlefields fighting German troops, Hitler was furious. In fact, Nazi propaganda portrayed African troops as symbols of what Hitler called the degeneration of France. This hatred actually began before World War II. After Germany lost World War I, France stationed African colonial troops in the Rhineland region of Germany. The Nazis launched a vicious propaganda campaign against them called the Black Horror on the Rhine. German newspapers spread racist lies claiming African troops were savages sent to humiliate Germany. These ideas became deeply embedded in Nazi ideology. So when France deployed African regiments again during World War II, German hatred intensified. But here's the shocking part. Despite racist propaganda portraying African troops as inferior, German battlefield reports often describe them as extremely dangerous fighters. Some German soldiers feared their aggressive battlefield tactics. Others were shocked by their endurance under brutal conditions. And in several battles during the 1940 German invasion of France, African troops fought with astonishing resistance even while French defenses collapsed around them. In May 1940, Germany launched a devastating attack against France and the Low Countries. This was the beginning of Battle of France. German blitzkrieg tactics overwhelmed Allied forces. Tanks smashed through defensive lines. Aircraft bombed roads filled with refugees. Entire divisions collapsed in chaos. But several African regiments refused to retreat. At battles near the Somme River and around Lyon, African troops held positions against overwhelming German assaults. One of the most famous units was the 25th Regiment of Senegalese Tirailleurs. In many cases, these soldiers fought to the last bullet. And the Nazis responded with horrifying brutality. Captured African soldiers were often separated from white French prisoners. Many were executed. Historians estimate thousands of African POWs were massacred by German forces during the 1940 campaign alone. One of the most infamous massacres occurred at Chasselet near Lyon in June 1940. After fierce fighting, dozens of captured African soldiers were machine-gunned by German troops. Some survivors reported tanks deliberately crushing wounded African soldiers. The massacre became one of many war crimes committed against black soldiers during the war. Because Nazi ideology considered them racially inferior. To Hitler's regime, an armed African soldier fighting Germans was considered an insult to Nazi racial beliefs. But despite massacres and defeat, the African soldiers' resistance left a deep impression on German forces. France eventually surrendered on June 22, 1940. Europe appeared lost. Hitler celebrated victory in Paris. And many believed the war was over. But across Africa, the fight was only beginning. After France surrendered, its empire split in two. Some territories supported the Nazi-collaborating Vichy French government. Others joined the Free French forces led by Charles de Gaulle. One of the most important African leaders to support de Gaulle was Félix Ebou, governor of Chad. His decision changed history, because Chad became one of the first territories to join the Free French resistance. From there, African troops became central to rebuilding France's military power. And one commander would soon become legendary: Philippe Leclerc de Hautecloque, better known as General Leclerc. In 1941, Leclerc launched daring military campaigns across the Sahara Desert using African troops from Chad and neighboring territories. Imagine this: thousands of African soldiers crossing some of the harshest deserts on Earth, fighting Italian and German forces in extreme heat, with limited water, minimal supplies, and almost no international attention. These campaigns helped free France survive during its darkest days. African soldiers captured strategic territories, destroyed Axis outposts, and kept resistance alive when much of Europe remained under Nazi control. Then came North Africa, one of the most important theaters of World War II. By 1942, North Africa became a massive battleground between Allied and Axis forces. German troops under Erwin Rommel fought fiercely across Libya and Egypt, but African troops from French colonies played major roles throughout the campaign. Moroccan Goumiers became especially feared. These were highly skilled mountain and desert fighters from Morocco. They specialized in nighttime raids, ambushes, and difficult terrain warfare. Even Allied commanders considered them among the toughest irregular troops in the war. During campaigns in Tunisia and later Italy, Moroccan units repeatedly broke through heavily defended German positions. Some German reports describe them as nearly impossible to stop in mountain combat. Meanwhile, soldiers from Algeria, Tunisia, Senegal, and Chad continued fighting across multiple fronts. African troops also supported Allied operations during Operation Torch. This operation marked a major turning point in the war, because it trapped Axis forces in North Africa between British and American armies. Eventually, over 250,000 Axis troops surrendered in Tunisia in 1943. It was one of Germany's first massive defeats. And African soldiers helped make it happen. But their hardest battles were still ahead, because soon, they would return to Europe itself. As Allied forces prepared to liberate Europe, African troops once again stood at the center of history. In 1943 and 1944, large numbers of North African soldiers fought in the brutal Italian campaign. This campaign became one of the bloodiest struggles of the war. German forces used mountains and fortified defensive lines to slow Allied advances. One of the deadliest obstacles was Monte Cassino. For months, Allied armies failed to break through German defenses. Then Moroccan Goumiers were sent through mountain paths the Germans believed impossible to cross. The result shocked German commanders. The Moroccan fighters bypassed defenses and helped crack the Gustav Line. The road to Rome opened soon after. Many historians consider this one of the decisive breakthroughs of the Italian campaign. Then came August 1944. The liberation of France. Thousands of African troops landed in southern France during Operation Dragoon. They helped liberate cities including Marseille and Toulon. In some battles, African soldiers fought street by street against entrenched German defenders. But something controversial soon happened. As Allied forces pushed deeper into France, many African troops were gradually removed from frontline units. French authorities wanted more white French soldiers visible during the liberation of Paris. This process became known as whitening the army. Many African veterans who had fought for years were sidelined before final victory celebrations. History was already beginning to erase them. When Nazi Germany finally collapsed in May 1945 after World War II in Europe ends, millions celebrated victory. But for many African soldiers, the suffering did not end. Some returned home expecting respect, equality, and payment for their service. Instead, many encountered discrimination and broken promises. One of the darkest moments came in December 1944 at Tirailleurs in Senegal. African veterans protested over unpaid wages and poor treatment by French authorities. The French military responded with gunfire. Historians still debate the exact death toll, but many African veterans were killed. Men who had fought Hitler were shot by the very empire they defended. For decades, their stories received little attention. European war narratives often focused mainly on white American and European soldiers. The contributions of African troops were pushed into the background. Yet without African manpower, France may never have rebuilt its military. Free France might not have survived. Several major Allied victories could have unfolded very differently. Today, historians are finally uncovering the scale of Africa's role in World War II. Hundreds of thousands of African soldiers fought across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Many died far from home. Some were executed simply because of their race. Others became heroes whose names barely appear in textbooks. But their impact on history was enormous. They defended France during its collapse, helped resist Nazi expansion in Africa, fought in deserts, mountains, and cities, and helped destroy one of the most evil regimes humanity has ever known. Yet perhaps the most haunting question is this: how different would history look if these African soldiers had refused to fight? Would Nazi Germany have held North Africa? Would Free France have survived? Would the liberation of Europe have taken longer? We may never know. But one thing is certain: the African soldiers Hitler feared most were not myths. They were real men. Men history nearly forgot. Until now. But this story goes even deeper. Because after World War II ended, many African veterans returned home with military experience, anger, and a new understanding of European weakness. And within years, those same veterans would help ignite anti-colonial revolutions across Africa. Empires that once ruled the world would begin collapsing. And some historians believe World War II did not just help destroy Nazi Germany. It also planted the seeds that would destroy colonialism itself. That is another story history rarely tells. For more videos like this, click like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.